Can I begin with something totally different than the statistics about fashion, about life, about politics? I'll get up and do two types of namaskar. They are not yogic exercises, so please don't misunderstand me. One is this namaskar. The other one is when I stay longer here, all eyes get focused on the person. Not only that, all energies, they begin to connect with him. Since we are the photographers who deal with physical reality, I'll just sit. We deal with the physical realities around us. So for us, body language matters a lot. And in any case, in our culture, they say, getting blessings is very precious. It takes you beyond the known. So when you bow down for a longer period, when energies begin to focus on you, that itself energizes you into something else. The world of creativity. Creativity is an urge that tickles, that creates ripples in your body. Your rooms wake up, and you are energized all over again. And if you have a medium to express yourself, that creative energy, that expression, it becomes a very powerful experience. You know, there are situations when you say, I went into my boss's office and I saw the atmosphere. I wanted to discuss something very serious, but I read the situation and I decided this is not the moment. Now, how do you read the situation? It's through body language and through the energy floating around in the space. Photography is all about body language and energies floating around in the space. Now, many people think art is about beauty. If Himalayas are beautiful, they are beautiful. So setting sun, warm light are cliches for photography. A beautiful child is a beautiful child. A beautiful girl is a beautiful girl. But without expression. There used to be a Beatles song. Her Majesty is a pretty nice thing, but she doesn't have much to say. So unless your photograph has something much to say and grab your spirit and charge you up and wake you up, it makes no sense. You see, digital technology is so amazing that we used to use films. And you used to use the best films, Kodochromes, which gave the best colors because you were living in New York and enjoying that privilege. Then comes the digital technology. Initially, it was not so, technically profound and meaningful. But the way it has evolved now is so amazing that I have used films for 35 long years, and so have you. But would you like to go back to using film?
Never.
Never. Good. Because that was technology and this is technology. Now, the programming in digital world is a very common word. God has been installing the biggest computer in our heads, which is so amazing. And the space it has and can be extended without any problem. But what is problematic for creativity and creative urge? That this guy who has sights, sounds, ideas, philosophies, everything, controls every movement of yours and doesn't let you connect with the situations, with the realities 100%. So we have become, most of us, we are programmed human machines, acting, reacting, responding in certain ways, the way we've been programmed. But may I say that creativity lives beyond concepts, beyond ideas, and even beyond philosophies. Because philosophies, even philosophies, are born later on. It's a moment of experience and realization when you go through an experience and you say, oh my God, this is what it was. And then you begin to put it in words, and that is philosophy. But in creativity, sometimes people ask us, what were you thinking when you were taking this picture? Isn't it? We were not thinking anything. Because when you think, the thoughts take over. Now, let me deviate a bit. Realizations become thoughts, thoughts become ideas, ideas become slogan when they are repeated. And if slogans are repeated without being fulfilled, that becomes politics, as we know. So, somebody says, I look at the world feelingly. Most of the time, our eyes are connected to this computer here, who controls us. But when we connect our eyes to the heart that we have, that throbs by itself for itself, and at moments misses a heartbeat, because the world has offered something so unique in front of you. And these are the creative, magical moments. Now, as I said, that art is not about beauty. Art is about human expression and human energy. The current human energy has. The power of expression is far more powerful than the beauty of Himalayas that you can see once, twice, and then you see what next. So the expression, and if expression is mixed with beauty, is even better. And I would like to say that Steve has managed to do that magic. Expression with beauty. And I am very jealous of it. This guy comes to India and steals away all the good pictures.
Well, it's a great honor to be here. It's even a greater honor to be here on this stage with Raghu. Raghu's, I think when I was starting photography, he was one of the photographers I looked to, along with other photographers like Henri Cartier-Bresson and André Cortege. But I think that when I think of India, my images that come to mind are pictures of Raghu's. But unlike Raghu, I decided to sort of wander the world for the last 40 years. And but I would say most of my work is really in South Asia. I would say Afghanistan to the west.
But why have you left your own country out of this?
Well, I was going to continue. So most of my work is in South Asia, but I've worked extensively in Africa, Europe, Russia, China. I think of myself more as a poet or an artist, and I think that you have to follow your own heart and your own gut, your own intuition, and photograph. If you're a photographer, or write what whatever your muse is. So for me, that muse was largely in South Asia, and I didn't really, I wasn't really so attracted to work in the. I've photographed in the U.S. a lot, but if somebody said, here's a free ticket to go somewhere in the world, or where I would want to go to Calcutta, I'd want to go to Iran, or I'd want to go to North Korea. I would not. My first choice would not be Cleveland. So for me, I love the variety of one day being. This year I was in Easter Island, and I was in Chile, Italy, Japan. So I like to kind of travel around and see different cultures, different ways of life. But you, on the other hand, your muse is really here, although we've photographed together in places like Malaysia and Thailand, and you've traveled to other countries.
Yeah.
But probably 99% of your career has been right here in India. Now, you're really lucky in that there's such a depth of culture, and that, you could spend 10 lifetimes
Absolutely.
traveling around this country and still really not get to the core. I feel I've been here probably maybe 80 times. And I haven't seen most of this country. But I'd like to ask you, what has been your why haven't you felt compelled to go and travel to other countries and photograph other places? Because for me, I like that variety. I like to see how people do things differently in Africa or South America or whatever.
Well, I'll say you are a flirt, going all over. But in your flirtations, you have your moments of love as well, for sure. But for me, India is my whole world. And also, initial years when I started taking pictures, not that I wanted to become a photographer, but it happened to me, and then people saw some of my early pictures and they said, oh, that was good. So I would say, really, that is good? And I used to be so shy that I never wanted to go abroad. I never wanted to go out of Delhi. But gradually, I began to shoot within my own country. And once in a while, I'll go abroad and feel it's not the same. But now, as an Indian shooting in my own country, I think you're right, one lifetime is not good enough in a culture like India, which is so ancient, which is so amazing, and yet on the move, and so contemporary, and so wonderful. The things are happening, the changes that are taking place in our society, worth recording. So the whole world is, for me, is India. But also once in a while, like we work together with foreign publishers, I have been shooting off and on. And now I am almost ready with a good book on the world that I have traveled to.
The neighborhood here, you could literally drive from Delhi to Kabul in, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 days. And then north to Tibet, you have Burma. it's such a rich area of the world that, you know, I found myself starting my sort of photographic career in India, and then kind of went into Afghanistan, which really was the big break in my career. But you know, 40 years later, you know, this is really the heart of my beat of my work. Tibet is so close, and it's so influenced by India. I would say that, and Burma, again, a neighbor. You see so much cultural influence in Burma. So, you know, I've been very happy to spend most of my entire career, 40 years, working in this part of the world.
That's wonderful, that if you can do that. I remember, you know, once Sebastian Salgado was here in India shooting his Workers series. And he was staying with us for 3-4 weeks at a stretch. And when I travel, I can't stay away from home for more than a week, 8 days. I have to come home like a little boy who gets lost and wants to be home. So I asked him, I said, Sebastian, how can you live abroad for so long without your home? He said something very beautiful. He says, I carry my home with me. And that was so wonderful. The ability to do that, everybody cannot do this. But then, you know, the first day when he came to Delhi, I invited him for dinner. So I reached home late. He was sitting and waiting for me. So we met for the first time. You know, he tells me, hey, Raghu, the energy in your house is so nice, so gentle. Why can't I stay here? I couldn't believe it. And for me, love and affection and tenderness is so precious, because without that, no sprouts, no flowering happens. I said, of course you stay with me. So there are people like this, there are people like you, there are people like me. The world is full of such situations. But for me, you know, also, I am very deeply connected with what is going on, the changes going on in my own country. And I can't afford to miss them, you know, like some of my good friends, when they are traveling abroad for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, I tell them, how can you leave the country alone, you know? That's why the country is suffering, because you are traveling away from India. So this is my attitude, you know. So I'm a home bird, you know, and it doesn't take me very long to come home and be home, you know. So there is a question for you on the girl, the Afghan girl.
Oh, well, the question's about the Afghan girl, which is not a surprise. It just happened to be, I was doing a story on the Afghan-Pakistan border, actually in 1984, and there were literally hundreds of refugee camps up and down the border. I was in one camp one morning and was literally on my way to lunch, and I heard these voices coming from a tent, which happened to be a girls' school. So I walked into the tent, and before I even had a chance to ask permission, I saw this little girl in the corner, which had these incredible eyes, and I knew instantly this was the only picture I wanted to make that day in that tent. So I asked the teacher for permission. I photographed some of the other students, but I had my sort of eye on her, and so I asked her to sit in front of my camera. I was on a tripod, and I was just kind of praying that I was shooting a very slow film, and I was just praying that
And that's why the quality was so good, because
Yeah.
it was slow film, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So she just sat there. The light was perfect. The background was perfect. Her expression was perfect.
And the luck was there.
And I literally didn't have to do anything. I just had to make sure the picture was in focus and sharp. And and then it just turned out to be something that changed my life,
Yes.
literally. Once it was
It
on
has
the,
appeared everywhere in this world, every magazine. And even National Geographic has repeated that picture over and over again with the recent portrait you did of her, right?
right. Yeah, she was on the cover 3 times of National Geographic. So then we lost track of her, and we went back in 2002 to try and find her. We found her. We were trying to help her and her family, gave her some money. We actually bought her a house. We started to compensate her for the picture, for the use of the picture.
Wow.
And then just like 2 years ago, she was arrested for having...
Being overexposed by you.
No, she was arrested because she had false documents. So they claimed that was the alleged... yeah. And they put her in jail.
So?
They put this poor woman in jail who had hepatitis. She has been an orphan. She was a widow. She had lost one of her children to had died. So they put her in jail, and then there was this big outcry. How can you do this to this poor woman? She's illiterate. And eventually they literally expelled her from Pakistan, and the Afghan government took her in, gave her a place to stay. The house that we bought her was lost, gone, never,
And where is she now?
Now she's in Kabul. But unfortunately, there are family intrigues going on that are kind of controlling her life, so that it's hard for her to really have her own voice. If things had been different, she could have been a UN ambassador. I mean, she would have been a great person to represent refugees around the world. So.
Yeah, thanks. Priya says, why is that some people carry 100 kgs in reality, but photographs are not so good? And some people, without carrying so much weight, can produce charming works. I'll answer this. Even donkey carries a lot of weight. So, carrying weight is not good enough, but depends on the kind of assignment you're doing. If you're doing a big long-term assignment where you might need big lenses and small lenses, that happens. But in my case, people like me, I like to simplify my life only to one zoom lens when I get into a situation, so that when I'm walking into a situation, I'm carrying just one camera, and not cameras and lenses and bags that people look at you and say, here comes a photographer. I don't want to look like a photographer. I want
I like to just say that we actually use the same camera and the same lens, which I didn't really know that until yesterday, but Raghu generally uses one camera, one lens, and that's why when I go out shooting, that's all I have is just that one camera. And it's for no camera bag, no tripod, no lights, just very, very minimal, very simple.
I think also with the age, you learn quite a few things to shed
No,
unnecessary weight.
Doesn't have anything to do with age. It has to do with knowing the great Henri Cartier-Bresson had one camera and one lens. And I think if you kind of, with experience, you can work very light.
Can you please come and read the questions, Yeah. Sorry, please carry on.
No, I was just saying, I think that, I think what you're after, and I don't think you need a lot of equipment to achieve that goal.
This is a question to Steve. You had a lot of photography. During war, the toll it takes on humans, what does it teach? Are you planning to write a book on it? Photography on war,
Okay.
or during Iraq.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, you know, it's funny, in my 40 years of photography, I spent maybe 1 year photographing areas of conflict. So I never really thought of myself as a war photographer, although working in Afghanistan is, I think, some of the most dangerous times of my life. I'm actually, ironically, if I do have a book coming out next month, I don't want to plug my own book, but it actually addresses, and some of the pictures are published, and it's about my experiences in Lebanon, Afghanistan, in Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge. I never really was interested in the actual combat or the fighting. I was always interested more in the human consequence, the refugees and the people who were caught in the middle of these conflicts. Suddenly they're living a very peaceful life, and then they find that they're in the middle, in between these two warring factions. And I remember that hundreds of villages were destroyed in Afghanistan, and they were all forced to flee for their lives. And for me, that was the story. That was the important story. It wasn't the combatants, the people fighting. So that's been my kind of main concern.
Well, there is a question from Sridhar, S. Sridhar. It says, do photographers have to be a bit of philosophers to make their photos tell stories? Well, there is a saying, a good picture is worth 1,000 words. For me, this is a cliche. 1,000 words can be a lot of noise. How about some silence? You see, we have been brought up on some of these statements, which sound so good, and we get excited about it. Oh, my picture says a lot. There was one photographer who used to say, every picture that I take has a story. So one day I asked him, is it worth sharing with anybody? Is the question. Now, philosophy, what is philosophy, which I explained earlier also? Our daily lives are based on certain relationships, emotions, and energies. And if we begin to feel and understand that world of energy and relationships, then it acquires bigger meaning, and which can be converted into some deeper sense of philosophy or an idea which is born out of this experience that you've captured. I mean, photographing Mother Teresa was something so unique for me that every time she almost questioned my existence. I was first time when I met her, she was hardly known in 1970. And the mother that I met in 70 and the mother she left us was the same mother. She never fluctuated as a human being. She never flickered her intensity of faith. So, 4 days I was shooting, and she says, tomorrow you don't come. I said, why not, Mother? She says, tomorrow is my Easter day, and I'll be in prayers, and I don't want any photographers to be moving around. So I was devastated, and I said, Mother, but you say you have two very important missions. A, that you do seva, you look after the poorest of the poor, and the second is, when you have done your seva, you want to connect with the Lord and you want to rejuvenate yourself. I said, I have never met him, who that man is, that God is. But when you sit in prayer, he lands in your eyes. I have photographed you doing seva. That is half of the story. The other half is when you connect with the Lord. I said, the other half is left out, mother. So she says, all right, with one condition. You come tomorrow and you will sit at one place. So I go there in the morning. She says, oh, you come in. She takes me into the chapel. She makes me sit in one corner. She says, you sit here. I said, yes, mother, because that's the promise I had made. So mother goes into, her prayer, and through prayer, I could see she's connected. And it was an amazing experience. So I was sitting on the side. I can't see her face. I get up. I go in front. I take my pictures, quietly come away. And then finally she gets up to kiss the feet of the Christ, which was 30 feet away. And I said, oh my God, what do? I get up again and I do my photography. Mother comes out. I come out. I go and I fold my hands. I said, Mother, I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise. You know what she said? She says, God has given you this assignment. You must do it well. So these are the blessings, So philosophies and blessings, everything works together. Is the time up?
Almost.
Almost.
If I could just push in one question. This is for Steve. In the age of phone cameras where everyone has become a photographer and there are apps to edit and make perfect what is not, what do you have to say about a plastic world with no real stuff? Archana Dalmia.
See, well, not you.
I'm actually a big fan of cell phones. And I have, every day I photograph with this camera that I'm holding right now. And I think they're, I've published some of these pictures in books. They make sizable prints. There are photographers who are doing very serious work with cell phones. I think that the quality of this is probably as good as the camera I was using 40 years ago. I can certainly work at much lower light. So I'm a big fan. And,
so the pressures are less.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve McCurry and Raghu Rai.